The Erskine Bridge over the River Clyde is well documented as the suicide hotspot of the west of Scotland. Every year, it is estimated that around 15 people take their lives by jumping from the 125-foot structure into the waters below. Each of the pedestrian walkways is dotted with SOS phones, signposts from the Samaritans, and CCTV cameras in an effort to prevent suicide attempts from taking place. The most recent incident at the bridge to be reported in the media was the tragic deaths of 2 teenage girls who were living at the Good Shepherd Residential Care Centre for young women with social, emotional and behavioural problems at the nearby village of Bishopton. Georgia Rowe, 14, and Niamh Lafferty, 15, left the centre unknown to staff on the evening of October 4th, 2009 and walked the 6 miles to the Erskine Bridge. Witnesses reported that they saw the girls leap hand in hand off the bridge and their bodies were recovered later that night. Unsurprisingly, the story was widely reported in the media across the UK due to its shocking and tragic nature. But there are a number of very significant issues which must be considered when dealing with such a sensitive story. First of all, if the story should be reported at all, and secondly, how it should be reported. For example, the story should never act as a step-by-step account of how to carry out a suicide. It is also very important that the story does not encourage copycat suicides. The public are not informed about the majority of suicides which take place, but some of these events are deemed to be within the matter of public interest.
In Norway, I think they just have a ban altogether on actually reporting suicide. I think in this country, obviously, we've got the Press Complaints Commission, which does kind of regulate, it's kind of self-regulatory body. But largely, where I work, on the newspaper I work at The Scotsman, we wouldn't really be reporting a huge amount of suicides unless we feel they're in the public interest. In that case, and I can only go on, the Scotsman's, the way we handled it. I mean, obviously, it's something that these are minors, they're young children, so it is something that you have to handle sensitively. But I actually think on that issue, I do think there was a strong public interest in actually covering that, because these children, I think, from memory, were in a care home. Now, as a society, you would think, we have a duty of care to those children, so therefore, if they're in a care home, it's something that you would want to find out about. You'd want to find out, well, were they being looked after properly? What were the reasons for them to actually take their own life? So I think from that, it comes away from the idea of it being a private matter. And the fact that they're minors as well would suggest that, there is, as I say, a duty of care as a society to find out what happened to them and what were the reasons that kind of prompted them to take their own lives. Interestingly, the Samaritans, if you speak to the Samaritans about it, they don't have a problem with newspapers covering suicides, and actually they feel as if it could be a plus point, it could be a positive thing, provided it's handled sensitively.
But it's the negativity in the media that's the problem. And if people say, right, if I tell somebody I'm feeling suicide or I'm having thoughts of suicide, they'll think I'm, again, crazy.
There have also been calls for the introduction of formal training for journalists on how to report upon suicide. Australia is one of the first countries to introduce such a scheme. In the UK, the Press Complaints Commission Code offers guidelines for journalists in line with recommendations from the Samaritans.
I actually think that it works pretty well, the system that we've got. It is self-regulatory. I know that, I think you said also in Australia, obviously they have a lot of training. But I think the system we have, provided every newspaper editor and every reporter is aware of the sensitivity of the cases, then that is something in-house that we would be aware of. Because in this country are getting a lot more information from the Press Complaints Commission about how to handle things. One example is even the phrase committing suicide. Now, there's been a lot of information that we've had from the PCC, and now as a newspaper and most other newspapers, you wouldn't use the phrase commit suicide. You would say the person took their own life. And I think that's a throwback from the days when actually it was illegal to attempt suicide. And if you're saying commit suicide, it's very much like committing an offence, commit murder. The inference is that the person is actually doing something wrong and that they are committing a crime.
I think it's essential, to be honest with you. I think as many people in any kind of role who can have some kind of suicide training, so we can change the whole culture around it, but in particular journalists, so that when they're writing a story, they'll have a wee bit more understanding of the human side of it, and not just be thinking about a story to sell papers. And kind of aware of is that it's a business and they're there to sell papers, so maybe that's not what they're thinking about when they're creating headlines. But if they had a wee bit more information and aware of this impact that they can have on people and their mental health, or like the work that people are doing to try and break down barriers around talking about suicide, then I think it can only help, to be honest. A more positive approach, and if they reported a suicide, maybe with sort of some explanation about help and support that people could get if they were feeling like that, then what would mean that people would understand that it's all right to talk about it, and instead of maybe just being closed up and try to cope with how they're feeling, and then these things are portrayed in the media, and that's kind of what sets off the chain of events.
The issue of reporting suicide in the media is very much of current importance as part of the Scottish Government's suicide prevention strategy, Choose Life, which aims to have reduced the suicide rate by 20% by the end of 2012. A PCC meeting on suicide reporting is taking place in Glasgow this week to discuss how best to cover these newsworthy incidents in future.